You don't want to miss it. We're going to talk about how to single out the thing you need to focus on in the midst of all these competing stimuluses and contradictions and distractions in order to manifest what God's called you to do. How to discern the fruit that God wants to show up in this season and how to let go of previous seasons of life. And we're also going to look at the power of competing commitments, how your fear of rejection or your reluctance to ask for help or your conflict about prospering may be getting in the way of you getting the raise, making a sale, attracting relationships, taking the chances you need. Competing commitments can be broken when they're discerned and discovered. And that's just 2 of the 10 items we covered. You don't want to miss this. Oh boy, what a joy to have you back with us again. We're talking about level 10 living. And the reason why I'm excited about this is because I'm actually going back into the gymnasium. I remember I was doing training work years ago when I was working with it was Tony Robbins and Stephen Covey and a bunch of peak performance guys in secular work. And I can remember they would say, we have to get back in the gym. What that meant was get back to the fundamentals of how we do what we do. And when I get back in the gym, it makes me a better player. And last broadcast, we covered so much great ground. You got to go back. If you didn't see it, you have to go back and get it right after this, because we ended on a key proposition, which is that no matter what you're going through, you're invited by God to live with passion and joy and focus. Now, this is important. You don't wait to have joy and celebration when you achieve the thing. You have joy on the plateau of development, getting to the achievement of a thing. And we covered this verse in Hebrews where Jesus, specifically the Bible says, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, and he endured for the joy that was set before him. Well, let me just read it to you. For the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And the key verse right after that is that he endured the contradiction of the people and what they were doing to him. He endured the process of contradiction, and that contradiction is going to come to you as you're pursuing the thing that God calls you to do. And we covered why contradictions are happening, because it's all probing your development. But there's another concept I left with, and I want to go into it right now. And that is, you can also be very distracted on the way to your goal. And man, right now, the news cycle, it's just so sad in a way that it sucks you in to whatever's going on in the world and emotionally hooks you. And you know what? It could actually rob you of the focus of what you should be paying attention to, because God's not holding you accountable for what's happening over a nation. He's going to hold you accountable for what he told you to do. So intentionality is the prize that God gave you. What is the joy set before you? Because if you're intentional, you can endure the contradiction and seize the prize. So the question I was throwing to Carl is this power of intentionality. My friend Brian Clemmer was one of the personal development guys that really impacted me. He brought this to my attention, and you went through some of that training yourself, as a matter of fact.
Yes, sir.
You achieved some unusual results in the process of that training, which we won't go into right now. But tell me about how this works.
Well, there's a number of different things to touch on. One of the things that you mentioned in the opening was the negativity being spread throughout the news. There's an interesting psychological phenomenon where you are 8 times more likely to share a negative event than a positive one. So that's actually just that's base psychology from an advertising and marketing standpoint. I learned that at university during my brief stint there. So you're more likely to gain a lot of traction. It's also why trash TV is so great. Reality TV, which isn't real, by the way. If you think it is, I'm sorry, it's not. Reality TV is garbage, and it has a higher probability of gaining traction societally because it's like watching a dumpster fire or watching a train wreck. So it's incentivizing the viewer to actually watch that type of garbage. Now, when we talk about intentionality, we need to be aware of what it actually entails. So when it comes to the idea of having the end in mind, it's a lot like Olympic athletes playing the tape in their mind. That's something that Michael Phelps refers to. I think we actually mention it in here too, where we talk about the science behind the concept of intentionality. Yes, on page 14 in the workbooks, Your Ultimate Life Strategy. It says here, before professional golfer Tiger Woods came along, there was Jack Nicklaus, who inspired Woods. Jack disclosed that he never took a golf shot without first clearly visualizing the ball's perfect trajectory in flight and its triumphant destination. So when it comes to intentionality, it's not just having this idea as to what it's going to come to fruition or how it's going to come about. It's actually embodying all of the mechanics and necessary movements in order to make that a reality. And so having everything very clearly visualized, it's like the old engineering saying, measure twice, cut once. If you have a very clear idea, clarity is power. So if you're clear on what it is that you want to execute and what it feels like to have done that, and you can actually embody that feeling, that sensation, that helps to sustain the motivation to endure the contradiction of whatever it is that needs to be done in order to have that reality come to fruition. Mercedes, you're taking a deep breath.
No, I like what you're saying. I just, as you're talking, I'm having different thoughts. But one of the things as you're sharing, so you're saying you're more likely to share a negative event. How many times? What was the stat?
It's a 1-to-8 ratio.
1-to-8 ratio. And you think about when we share negative stories, it's the opposite of what happens in church when you testify about a good thing. And the point of a testimony is to build faith, like, oh, God healed me. God, I got the check in the mail. I got that breakthrough. And so you think about the importance of testimony as a faith builder, and then sharing the negative events, I think actually it's a different form of testimony. It's like a demonic testimony that actually builds faith in a different way. It builds expectation in a different outcome. And so just as we're talking about, when we talk about the dream, the distress, the develop, the demonstrate, I was just having this revelation that I actually think there's a war waged against us just to dream, just to hope for a different outcome. Because I think there's a lot of people, when we do our weekly podcast, the political stuff, and I so appreciate what you said in the opening, Lance, that it's like, you know what? You need to put that aside, because the thing that you're going to be held accountable for when you stand in front of the Lord is, did you do the things that I asked you to do with your life?
Right.
And the question is, are you even allowing yourself to dream? Because you're so caught up in the idea that it's hope. Biden's in office. It's hopeless. I can't do anything. It's like there's like a hopelessness of almost like a roadblock. I think people trip over, right? Or you could do the same thing. Just forget Biden. Like you can say, well, I don't have enough finances. I don't have enough blank, to do that thing. And there's a war against even dreaming of what your God-given destiny might be. So anyways, just as you're talking, I'm just thinking about these things, and just the idea that when you say the joy that's set before you, Jesus had a hope of a different outcome. He saw man reconciled to God through his sacrifice of his life and his perfect life and his death on the cross. He saw, the church. He saw at the end, in eternity when he returns for his bride and for his church. He saw nations restored in their rightful place. He saw, like godly authority being released in the earth again. That was what was set before him. And that's why he endured it. And he had joy going through it because he was clear on what the outcome was. And I just have this revelation that if you're not clear on what the outcome is for you or for your nation, if you don't have hope for those things, how will you ever endure? How will you ever move towards those things? You might even maybe you don't have a full enough vision. You won't even fulfill all the things God's called you to do in your life. Yeah, I mean, that's your level 10, right? That's 10-10. Maybe you're only going to do a 5 out of 10 because your vision isn't clear enough. Anyways, just was getting a download while I was sitting over here.
And just as a quick reference to the body politic, I think we're all just biding our time. Trying to keep it casual.
Oh gosh. I got it too. Hold on. Did you hear Biden went to the hospital?
Oh no, what happened?
He couldn't stop Putin. Did you like it? Did you get it? It's a thinking joke. All right. Sorry, Lance.
I was going to make a profound biblical point, but sorry. I don't know if it really fits right now in the moment. I'll hold it till later.
No, go back to it. You told us we could be more casual.
Endure the contradiction, Dad.
Endure the contradiction. Okay, So and this is like, I did this wealth conference recently with Billy Epperhart, right? And these guys are really blowing and going. He's got I think up to $100 million in different investment accounts because he isn't looking at the world through the lens of a Great Depression, economic collapse, as many of us who are not like him look at, what do we do? What do we do? We're almost like looking at anxiety strategies. But to the point of, if you're doing what God calls you to do, then God will give you the wisdom and the strategy. Like we often say, if there's a flood coming, then God will give you a boat that will float. So you have to get out of anxiety and into the plan of God, because the plan of God is what's going to pull you through. And I remember while I was there at the conference, I just kind of got a spontaneous download, as sometimes happens if I'm in the right place at the right time. And it occurred to me that these guys that are involved with these nations and these building projects that they're involved with, it's where their $100 million comes in, is in other countries. And I said to them, let me just jump to the chase here. If the Antichrist is on the horizon and the tribulation is stalking us, then what good does it do for you to build a Costco and bring infrastructure into a nation and prosper and put that money into another country, if it's all going to go to the Antichrist system? Then what use is it? Isn't it kind of like, to what purpose are you even engaged in all this business?
To do the work that I've set out for you to do.
Well, that's one part of it. But then I said, but to me, that's the reason why I go to challenge the narrative of what the nations are going to be like in the last days. Is everybody going to get saved? Obviously not. Jesus said, broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many there be that go in there. Narrow is the way that leads to life. But that doesn't mean that many can't get saved, and that there aren't people that are evangelists like Mario Murillo going to bring them in by the boatload. It's that nations are going to be aligned against the Lord in the last days. But when Jesus returns, Matthew 25 says, there will be sheep nations. And I believe, I told this group this, I said, so here's what you're doing. You're the one organization I know of that's actually building the infrastructure of sheep nations that are going to prosper and resist. Because during that 3.5-year period of time, and I can prove to you it's not 7 years, it's 3.5 years of when this Antichrist activity is going to war, he's constantly going to war for one reason. Kings of the east rise up, kings of the south, kings of the north, because not everyone is submitting. And so, the saying is, well, who can beat him? It's like Napoleon. Who could beat him? But his whole life was spent putting down rebellions. That means there are going to be resistors and there's going to be nations. My point is, if you can't see the joy of the outcome that you're laboring for, then you do what you just said, Mercedes, is very important. You faint in your mind, as Hebrews chapter 12, verse 3. Consider him that endured contradiction, lest you become weary and faint. Because if Jesus had to endure the contradiction and succeeded, then when you go through that period of pushback, just recenter yourself and say, God told me there'd be days like this on the way to my prize.
I'm glad that you just said that, because where we left off on the last episode was applicable things that we can do while enduring those contradictions. And I know, Mercedes, you have a list, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, yeah, I have a list.
Yeah.
Don't you have a list too?
Ladies first.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, we can go back and forth.
Your list is a lot longer than mine, so just ladies first.
I have a lot. I was like,
There's a lot you can do.
Yeah, so we talk about power of intentionality. I just hit the mic. I'm so sorry, Scott. Who's our sound guy, and I just hit it again. Sorry, Scott. Okay, so shout out to Scott. Okay, so I think a couple of things. So if, let's say you are clear on where you're moving towards, right? Your ultimate goal, vision for your life, which we could cover, and even how you discern that, I think we should cover in some material.
Yeah.
But let's say you know where you're going. I think it's important to celebrate progress. I think that's really critical. And a lot of times people tend to be pass or fail. Like either I did it perfect and I'm 100% there, or I totally failed at this. And there was a time Lance realized that I celebrate like everything. We were going to get his passport. He was trying to get down to Aruba with you guys, and he had misplaced his passport. So he had to go to the Dallas office. Like, no one else was here. So this ended up becoming my project while you guys were out of town.
Thank you for using the word project.
Yeah, it was great. So we got all the paperwork together, and we went down there, and we got turned away the first day because we didn't have a photo. It was just like so dramatic. And so, but anyways, so the next day we finally got all of our ducks in a row, and I'm like waiting in line, and it's like this line wraps around the entire lobby. And so it's like every time we would move to like a new wall or a new area, I'm like, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. We're almost there. And Lance looks at me, he's like, you celebrate everything. You celebrate the progress. I was like, yeah. I was like, because it keeps me going, it keeps me motivated, And it's like, he's thinking like success is getting the passport. And I'm like, it is. But at the same time, we're like at least 50 feet from where we were before. And so it's just interesting. I think it's important as you try these new things to not look at it as, well, I'm not down 50 pounds. I'm like, yeah, but you're down 2 pounds. You're looking leaner. You've lost an inch, or just celebrate the fact that you've gone consistently to the gym for 5 days, or you've monitored your calorie intake for 5 days. So I think that's one of my practical things is like celebrate progress is important.
Yeah. Just to interject there's this amazing book by BJ Fogg called Tiny Habits. And that's exactly what he recommends doing is when you start doing these little tiny habits, if it's after you use the restroom and you wash your hands, you do a few push-ups and then you wash your hands again or something like that. Celebrate. Do like a little like, attaboy,
Are you doing push-ups in the bathroom?
No. It's once you leave. It's once you leave.
Okay.
Those are the wall push-ups.
Oh, okay. I was like getting concerned.
Wear your gloves, people.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Lance?
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm thinking is I went to the doctor this week because I was a little frustrated, putting on some weight. I had lost weight, and I didn't want to drag you guys to the story, but I mean, around the holidays, people were making me all kinds of chocolate things, and I have a little, kind of a weakness, a sin that easily besets me, is chocolate and peanut butter things.
Fair.
And so I'm eating them, and I got down to, I'll give you what my weight was. It was like I got it down to like 184 or something. I was slimming down, and then I don't know what happened, but it was the habit pattern, and it was I lost the habit pattern. I lost the things that I was doing. I got excited about looking slim, and then I started relapsing into the old pattern again.
Little splurge here and there.
Right, it's the reverse what you said. Instead of doing the push-ups, I was eating a little bit more on a little
3 ice cream bars a day.
Keto ice cream bars. I got keto ice cream bars, which are great. They're like a low-calorie kind of low whatever dessert, but I wasn't doing a keto diet. I was just eating the keto ice cream bars at the end of the day. Yeah. Anyway, I go to the doctor and I said, hey, check me out here because I got to get I want to check out my levels and stuff and see if there's something wrong with me. And he said, well, look, all right, let me weigh you. There you go, lead and lag measures you talked about last episode. We always got to have data that helps us to know where we are. In intentionality, you need to be focused on the data and not on the contradiction. And he said, you're 190. I said, you see, I was down to 184. I'm at 190. Now catch this. He said, look, you were 195 when you came in, and I met you. So, all right, you got it down 5 pounds. That's what you got to look at. And all of a sudden, it's amazing how the refocus. Because we talk about focus, self-talk, and
cognitive
physiology.
reframing.
And it's like the moment he said, man, when you came in here, you were 195. And you're telling me you went down to 184? Well, this is the first time I've weighed you. And all that I can tell you is your next number I'm writing down is 190. You're 5 pounds light. Keep it up. Get back in the discipline. But this is the point. It's incremental. And it's a little here, a little there. And sometimes I think we're an instant everything generation, and we think that things are going to happen faster than they do. And it creates a terrible expectation with millennials on the way the world ought to be. And I think it's a large part of cancel culture is this impatient intolerance for what it takes to build the complex system that prospers a nation. And so you kind of screw the whole thing up if you want instant green, and you suddenly find out that, the price of gasoline, food, and everything else just doubled. I did a study of gold medal performance once, and that was the attributes of peak performers in a variety of professions. And I wanted to find a connection to the Bible And boy, did I find it. I found this whole world around this world convergence. And I put it together in a series, which is really called Gold Medal Performance. But then I did a Bible study, which was kind of a synopsis of a lot of the training. And I put it together for you as a free gift. And this was done for my students at that time, people I wanted to really reach out to. You want to get the Gold Medal Performance Bible Study material. All you got to do is go to lancewallnow.com/gold study. That's lancewallnow.com/gold study. Trust me, this is the distillation of about a decade of observation and meditation on characteristics of peak performance and supernatural instruction in the Bible about how to arrive at convergence in your own life. You don't want to miss it. It's just the best stuff I've got out there.
I was going to throw in there too, there's this other thing we tend to do as humans where when you screw up like that, let's say a diet or really in life or in sin, I've seen this happen. I've done this where you're kind of like, well, let's just keep going with bad decisions, and it's like, it's so strange to me where it's almost like one bad choice begets another. It's like, well, I put on 5 pounds, might as well just eat this bowl of spaghetti. It's like, I don't know what it is about us, but it's very hard to stop sometimes, reframe and say, you know what? It was just one bad day or it was just one bad couple of days and I'm going to get right back into it. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, if I could give a special shout out to Dean Graziosi for this comparison, but he said it's the equivalent when you start making those small little bad choices. It's the equivalent of noticing that there's a crack on your screen on your phone and then just taking a hammer and beating the rest of it out of existence, where it's like, all right, well, I already messed up, so nothing will work right. It's like, that is the wrong dichotomy. That's the wrong bias to have. Like on or off, like you were saying before, how some people are like, well, I didn't hit the metrics the way that I wanted to, so I'm a failure, or having that negative mindset attached to it.
100%.
So yeah.
And let me hit on two thoughts here that I think are important on page 13. And for those of you that are going through this material with us, this is your ultimate life strategy. And we're talking about how the stages of life are designed so that God has fruit in certain seasons. And I remember when I was in Rhode Island, I was pastoring, and I never would have left Rhode Island because one of the challenging things about prophetic ministry is that we had all this future God kept on giving us. And I hadn't manifested it. So I never felt like I was free to leave until we had manifested everything that God had said. And then we had a flood in our basement. And there was a septic flood, actually. It was like sewage stuff. And I had downstairs in my basement, being a young prophet and traveling with Kim Clement and Mark Sharona and these great prophets. And I had all these prophecies that were all typed out in my basement. And they got like water and liquid, and all of the ink was draining. I underlined them and highlighted them, and they were all like, ugh. And I remember like putting them up on like a clothesline, trying to dry them out, because I had, back in those days, you typed it out. They didn't have dragon speak where you could just dictate it. And I can remember looking at it and saying, oh, my prophecies, oh my gosh. And the Lord said to me that something interesting. I think it's from Psalm 1, where he said that when you meditate upon the Lord and you're planted by the rivers of living water, you will bring forth fruit in its season. And the Lord said, you are holding on to the wrong season because there's fruit for a certain season. Someone needs to hear this right now. There's fruit for a season. And when that season passes, you have to let go, even if it's grieving, you have to let go of the fruit that didn't manifest in that season, because if you hold on to the wrong goals in the next season, you're missing the fruit for that season. So I realized that it was as though the Lord was saying, there's a period of time for your call in Rhode Island. It's ending. And there's certain things you did. There are certain things that were potential that didn't happen. Let it go, because by focusing on what hasn't happened, you're missing the fruit that is in your next season. Yep. And so I had to disengage and move on. But it goes to a certain point that I want to make, and that is, Kim Clement was very helpful to me because he told me, verily, he said, if you do not leave, you shall die. I never heard him give a death prophecy. And it freaked me out because he could be very, very accurate. And I said, what? He said, you have to leave Rhode Island. For if you do not leave, you shall surely die. So that's just take it. You got to go, Lance. You got to move on.
Where did Kim want you to move to?
Well, California, to be with him.
To be with him, right? Okay,
Exactly.
Just wanted to, put the bottom.
But what's ironic is I moved.
Nobody told me we can be in California right now.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
well-
God we're not. Okay.
He told me that I had I had enough faith to get halfway there. I went to Texas,
That was it.
and that when my faith was mature, I'd make the whole journey to California. That's what he
Really?
said.
Oh,
But
we
what
gotta
was
pray that
ironic,
in. Let's pray that in.
here's the irony. I moved to where he lived, and he left this area and went to California. I literally moved to within like a half an hour of his house.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but the point that I want to make is,
Right.
for those of you that love prophecy, there is an illusion here, and I want to make sure we're really clear on this. The purpose of prophecy is to give you the target of the joy set before you. Prophecy does not accelerate your journey. It clarifies your direction. Prophecy does, I think people think that prophecy is some kind of like magic thing that's going to get you there. Prophecy clarifies the target. It doesn't accelerate the passage. So you still have to go through the growing process. And that process means that the purpose of prophecy is to help you endure the process
100%.
because God's given you a promise of what's on the other side. And the other part is you have to know the season you're in, and you have to be walking in an update with God on what's the fruit for this season, because I maybe need to let go of some other things that I've wanted in order to keep up with the present opportunity that God's given me.
Yeah, going back to the applicable, actionable things that you can do to help sustain the motivation through the contradictions is to have a list of stuff to do when stuff goes wrong. There's different terminology that I use with my clients, but the idea is the same, where just because you're going to experience setbacks, you're going to experience shift, it's a guarantee. There's nothing as constant as change. So that's going to happen. Having that short list of things to do, okay, I didn't get A, I can still do B. Okay, B isn't going to work out, I can still do C. Having that list of actionable steps that are in line with the goal that you want to make manifest is another great thing to do, to have under your belt, in your arsenal, ready to roll.
Where would you put that? Do you have a journal of some sort you're working with, or is this just like
Actually, what we've provided for you in the back of these workbooks is an extra page of note-taking options. So yeah, I would recommend while you're going through your life journey process, figuring out where you want to go, where your hard goals are, what your maximum impact is going to be on the earth, you reverse engineer what those steps are that you want to see, what are the lead measures that are going to get you there. And so that's where you're going to have that list.
lovely?
I like it. I got one more thing I'm going to add in here. I know we're getting up in time here, but I think there's also a very practical thing that people should do if you're really clear on where you want to go and what you should be doing. I think acquiring new skill sets and knowledge is critical.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes when you have that, like especially in the Christian world that we tend to float around in, you'll get a prophetic word like that, right? Like you're going to be, Lance, you're going to speak to millions of people, and, you're going to have the blueprints that are going to change nations. And you get a word like that and you're like, that's so great. Can't wait for that to happen. But, like when I first met you, before I worked for you, I was doing online marketing, digital marketing. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've been learning all about that right now. Will you come work for me? Will you come do this? And I was like, I don't know if I can do that right now. But 2 years later, I decided I could. But my point is that you were investing in learning practical new things that were going to help you fulfill the call of God in your life. You still do that to this day. I mean, you'll learn the TikTok, you'll learn all sorts of stuff. You were doing Periscope.
Okay.
I mean, you were doing Periscope.
You talk about doing it even when you don't know what you're conscious and confident.
Conscious and confident. I have photos back when Periscope was a thing. Before I worked for you, I was watching you, like many of your fans out there, and you couldn't figure out how to flip the camera around. And so you had opened up your laptop and you had the screen where it was his picture, and you were recording yourself on your laptop. I have a picture of that. It's so funny.
It was beautifully innovative.
I didn't know you could flip the image around. So I would go to what the computer.
Yeah, I forget what that's called on the computer, but it's like the app where you can kind of like
photo
see
booth?
your photo booth. Yeah. You open up photo booth. So it's like, but that's what I'm saying. That's the conscious and comment. That was really the beginning. I mean, you used to write all the time. I have so many blogs, like literally thousands of blogs that you used to write, and you've shifted almost completely to video through that conscious and competent phase. So here you are filming yourself, you figured it out, Periscope blew up, it got bought out. And then what ended up happening is Facebook added in video technology, Instagram added in that video technology, and then you transitioned over to Facebook.
Yeah.
And we've never come up with a good name for our Facebook people like we used to have with our
Periscope, we're Periscopians. Although now it's metaverse, so maybe we're getting a little bit more, now we got a little more to play with, because Facebookians never worked.
Yeah, Facebookians was weird. TikTokians
is, that's like a little people with little squirrely things coming out, like, almost like a Reddit character with the things coming out of their heads, a TikTokian.
Yeah.
But let me just clarify something that Mercedes danced over, and it goes to the point that I want to close with, and throw it back at Carl again for the next episode, so he knows what we're going to talk about. But she says, I invited her to come work for me, and that it wasn't the right timing. And then 2 years later, it was. More specifically, what she said to me was, "You can't afford me." And it had nothing to do with timing. It had to do with my ability to pay her.
Well, actually, time is money.
It did have to do with timing. It was not the right time. I did not have release from the Lord to go
But
yet.
she didn't say to me, "I'm seeking the Lord for timing." She said, "You cannot afford me."
I said, "Do you see this golden handcuff? I can't go anywhere."
Yeah. So, but here's where I want to go with this. This is the important point. And it's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, it's a great point, because I know a lot of Christians that are stuck in poverty. They're stuck in a poverty mindset. And I'll explain this real quick. There's a word called competing commitments, and you don't have them when it comes to money. And that's why you can become congruent. That's why you could help us in business. You could help other people too, because you have no competing commitment about guilt or conflict over prospering what you put your hand to. I, for instance, found that I could raise for Randy Clark or for other ministries. I learned how to take offerings. I learned how to make appeals, and I could raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for others. And then when I had to step out and ask for what I was doing, someone showed me something. They said, "Did you notice how when you were raising funds for these other causes, you were compelling and convincing. But when you were talking about what you were doing, you stepped back. You physically walked back from the front of the platform. You walked away from the audience. And instead of being convincing, you felt almost as though you were guilty, like do what you can. And it's because in my training, I equated because I'm raised part Catholic and part Anglican, but it gets into you. I equated a vow of poverty with holiness. And it was still there before I became a Christian. And so I thought that when I became a Christian, I had to, and in a sense, it's a beautiful thing. I had to leave. I grew up as a rich young ruler. I grew up with the country club, with a dad who was a vice president of an oil company, and I left it all to go be an itinerant disciple and follow Jesus and plant churches. And my thinking was, I just have to accept the fact that I'll trust God for my clothes and my shoes, but I'll build my faith, and I'll get a car. And then the Lord one day, through a prophet actually, said, the devil's told you I'm going to make you poor, but the Lord says I'm going to make you rich. And I realized that I had a competing commitment. My commitment to being humble and to being holy made me conflicted when it came to receiving money for the work I was called to do. And so what happens is, and this will happen to you, you have something you want to accomplish, but your fear of failure will come up. And the fear of failure will cause you to have a competing commitment. And those two things cancel each other out. So let's say that this is like for dating, if you're younger. You want to attract somebody, you want to ask them out, you want to get to know them. But when you're around them, you're drawn to them because you would love to be with them. But when you're with them, you're awkward and you're goofy and you're kind of like, strange and eccentric. And it's because you're afraid of doing something wrong, and the fear of rejection cancels out your desire for, your effectiveness, and competing commitments will cancel you. You don't have that competing commitment in that area.
Sure.
You have them in other areas.
Sure.
But I want to point this out to the audience and to the people that are out there that we're working with. You have to recognize that your previous life conditioning puts in you scripts and beliefs that show up in how you show up. And the whole focus of this unit right here is intentionality, that those competing commitments get you off track when you're intending to make a living, when you're intending to get a promotion, when you're intending to make an impression, and that competing commitment of fear or rejection, or I don't think I should ask for support, it actually blocks you from the intention being manifest.
Interesting.
Number of things. One, I radically agree with the majority of what you said. When dealing with approaching somebody who you're interested in, it might not necessarily be fear that's actually preventing you from operating optimally. It might be overstimulation. So in one of the other segments that I've shared with you guys, we talk about the Yerkes-Dodson curve, which is a bell curve. And so your operant abilities are at the sweet spot between adequate stimulation and too much stimulation. So if you're overwhelmed with that internal monologue of like, I really want them to like me, I hope they like me, I hope I don't look weird, and then you end up getting caught up in your head, like we said earlier in another message, if you're in your head, you're dead. So you need to allow yourself that space to be yourself, not be overly stimulated. Reassure yourself, hey, I'm a decent person. I got some stuff to offer. I'm worthy, and have that type of mindset. Another idea when dealing with competing commitments is if it's not an oh yeah, then it's an oh no. So if it's not, I prefer to say heck. If it's not a heck yeah, it's something that you get excited about, then it's an absolutely not. Under no circumstances am I going to waste my time doing that, because it's not going to be my highest and best. So that's how you can avoid dealing with competing commitments some of the time. That's not to say that you actually do have 100% free reign of your job, for instance. Sometimes for jobs, you have to do stuff you don't want to do. That's understandable. That's great, especially for developing new skills, like Mercedes was talking about. We were talking about the plateau earlier. Developing new skills and new learnings is one of the best ways to help endure that plateau experience, because you're going to continue to grow in another area while you're still feeling like you're maintaining that same level on whatever it is that you're plateauing on.
I like that. I think I was going to chime in that, as you were saying, like if it's not an oh yeah, it's an oh no. My practical life experience with that is that I dated this guy. I was engaged to him in college. And I kept asking the Lord, I'm like, Lord, is this the guy? He's just such a great guy, great man. But I never got an, oh yeah, this is the guy. And I didn't realize it, but like I should have learned that lesson. I learned that lesson the hard way, that he wasn't the guy. Very good guy, but I basically spent 3 years, didn't go to Europe with my friends, didn't do all sorts of stuff. And my life really radically changed throughout college because I never had an oh yeah. And so I think the Lord operates that way too, that if it's not a very clear yes, absolutely, I now take it as a no. Yeah. I'm not even gonna, like, especially if it's a huge commitment like that, I'm not gonna do that. You know what I mean? And so there are some micro things where it's like, well, God's probably good with this, like, let's see what type of fruit comes from it. But with major life decisions, I really feel that way about the Lord, that he may not even say no to you. It's just not a yes.
Right, exactly.
So I now take it as a no. Versus when I met Larry in the bookstore, and I thought the Holy Spirit was going to like burst out of my chest. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. There's the day I was saved and the Holy Spirit came into me. And then there was the day that I met Larry.
And he left.
And it was like, the Holy Spirit's like, this is an important person. And I was like, okay. So I was like, and he's like, do you want to come to my Bible study? I was like, yeah, okay. And I haven't been apart from him since, but the Holy Spirit will do that to me if it's an important, like I'll feel him in my chest here, and I'm like, oh, this is somebody important. I better talk to that person. Yeah. But man, when I met Larry, it was like, you might as well like supernatural sirens going off in the spirit, because it was.
Oh
nuts.
wow, how sweet! I've never heard you say that before.
Oh yeah,
I don't even know if Larry's ever heard you say that before.
Well, Larry's heard me say that before. But listen, how ironic it is, because he's a publisher. He's the publisher of Destiny Image now, and we met in the Christian book section at like Barnes and Noble. And my opening line, because I wasn't like Pentecostal or anything, I grew up Presbyterian. And I see all these books with like Joyce Meyer, and I'm like, all these shelves. And I just turn, because I'm random like that. I just turn, and then like Larry's standing next to me, don't know him. And it's like, who the heck is Joyce Meyer? And why does she have like 3 shelves of books? And Larry's like, oh my. And it's like one of his like favorite authors, you know, and he's like, well, let me tell you all about it. So he sent me home with all sorts of crazy books. And
I love this conversation. Unfortunately, we've gotten over the time limit, which is always a good thing. It's kind of like, you know, you lose track of time. It's a sign of flow. But I want to end on this thought. I had an aha while you were talking, Mercedes, that I want to give, because if I don't give it, it could be for somebody watching right now. And I almost hesitate to tell you this, because whenever you're giving relationship advice, sometimes you give great advice for people that are in a relationship, but they're not committed yet. And I want to remind you of this, that one of the things you want to look for in a life partner is, do they invite you into becoming a greater you? Do they, in the way they treat you and the way that they interact with you, do they compete with you, criticize, put you down, or in some way not appreciate? Or do they invite you to become greater? Because if they're inviting you to your greater self, it's because they see you in the greater self. And you want to have around you people that see your unmanifest potential, because that's what Jesus probably spent all night praying to get 12 exact names for who he would choose to follow him, because he could see the ones that the Father had the apostolic call on. And so he would call them to follow him so that they could step into their greater self. And you want to be surrounded with people like that. And if you're in a relationship with someone who is not like that, it could be that you need to be the person that invites them into being their greater self.
Be the change.
Because when they start to step into that, they'll give themselves permission to be generous with others, because they probably beat themselves up a lot. But we'll come into that. And Mercedes, let's land the plane. I'm going to end the program with you. You're going to end it.
Well, I know you can end it. I was just going to, I think that is so phenomenally true what you just said. And that I know my husband has done that for me, and I've done that for him. And I really try to keep relationships around me, that even friendships that do that, right? Like the whole show me your friends, I'll show you your future type of a thing. I heard it put to me one time this way, that it's like, if you're single, like you are more effective for the kingdom of God single. And when you become more effective with a partner, that's when God's going to bring you your spouse. That as a team, we're now more effective for God's kingdom working together than we are separate and by ourselves. And so I heard that, and I was like, oh, that's really freeing in some respects, you know, especially as a woman. You're like, well, am I going to meet this person? But to go all the way back to the very beginning, you know, which I think was in this podcast, but it's like, as for you, you follow me. Who cares about what this person's doing? Who cares if you have a spouse? Who cares what's happening in the world? Your job is to follow me.
Wow. Yeah. On that note,
what a strategy, huh?
We don't want you guys to miss this, okay? So let's all hold up what we're doing. What got us into this rich conversation? Take a look at this. Take the wide shot, cameraman. Everyone's holding it up. Thank you. Here we go. All of us are working with your ultimate life strategy. It's one of these, it's 4 modules we have, actually. Yeah. And the other, we have 3 more. Imagine this. If we got all that out of this, what are these other 3 going to do? Actually, maybe overload.
We got all of this out of one of the sections.
One chapter in one.
This wasn't the whole kit and caboodle. This was just one segment of one section of one of the books.
And, you know, I like it too, because it's like we go a little deeper in terms of the conversation here, that, you know, we're all kind of adding in, you know, our random life experience into it and our thoughts and things like that. So yeah, it's a great course. And if you want to go get it, you can get it at level10living.com. And everything's right there. You're looking for your ultimate life strategy. And we have a special deal for our podcast listeners. If you're listening to this on social media, just put in the word podcast and you will get 20% off. It's a great deal.
It's 20% off.
20% off. I have mixed feelings about it.
I'm no longer having competing commitments about this. You need to get this. You need to invest in this.
I'm having competing commitments because I'm feeling like 20% is a lot. Maybe we should make it 10% because it's level 10 living.
We should make it 20% if they do it now, 10% after today.
That's what I'm saying. Well,
But we'll let it go.
I
We'll
have
let it
some
go. We'll let it
competing
go.
commitments of my own, but
Yeah, it's going to be a weird edit.
All right, Carl, Mercedes, and Lance, we're going to see you again tomorrow.
All right.
God bless.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world. See you tomorrow.